Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to be focusing on the Democratic Republic of Congo.
DRC.
Yeah, the DRC, and how the Seventh-day Adventist Church is responding to this, conflict that's been escalating there.
Yeah.
We've got two sources that we're going to be looking at today.
Okay.
One is a recent call to prayer that was put out by the East Central Africa Division.
Mm-hmm.
And then also we've got a statement from way back in 2008.
Oh, what?
From the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, which was addressing a previous conflict.
Okay, interesting.
And it's really, it's remarkable to me how the church consistently, blends this spiritual guidance with, tangible action when they're navigating these really complex situations.
Yeah, you can definitely see that in this February 2025 call to prayer.
Yeah.
They're not just urging prayers for peace. It's also highlighting the need for, practical support for those who are, caught in the crossfire of this conflict.
Absolutely. And that's where I think this gets really interesting, is this idea, the call to prayer specifically references Psalm 50.15.
Mm-hmm.
Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me.
Right.
It's like this direct line to hope in the middle of all this chaos.
It is. And I think that particular verse, it speaks volumes about that core belief in the power of prayer to spark change.
Yeah.
But it also goes a step further, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It emphasizes God's willingness to help and deliver, offering reassurance to those who are struggling.
Right, and that's what I think is so powerful about this connection between faith and action.
Yeah.
The call to prayer isn't just about seeking divine intervention.
Right.
It's also about mobilizing a global community to provide that tangible aid and support those who are suffering.
Exactly. It's a reminder that faith isn't passive.
Right.
It's a call to action, a catalyst for positive change.
Yeah.
And in the context of the DRC, that action takes on, even greater urgency.
Yeah. And, it's heartbreaking to think about the impact that this conflict has had on the church's planned evangelistic campaigns.
Oh, yeah.
In Kinshasa, Goma, and Lubumbashi.
Huge undertaking.
Yeah, these were supposed to be monumental events, bringing people together, sharing this message of faith and hope.
Right.
And now they're indefinitely on hold.
Yeah, and that postponement represents a significant loss.
Yeah.
Not just for the church, but for the communities they were intended to serve.
Mm-hmm.
These campaigns weren't just about religious outreach. They were about building bridges, fostering unity, and offering a sense of hope.
Yeah.
In a region that desperately needs it.
That's a great point. And it makes me wonder if the church had been able to move forward with these campaigns as planned. Could they have contributed to a more peaceful resolution?
Yeah,
think about the potential impact of bringing people together from different backgrounds, united under this shared message of faith and hope. Could that have shifted the dynamics of the conflict in any way?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And while it's impossible to say for sure, it certainly highlights the role faith can play in fostering peace and reconciliation. Even in the midst of conflict, shared religious beliefs can create that common ground, providing a foundation for dialogue and understanding.
That's a really powerful idea.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about, these broader implications of faith and action, not just in the DRC, but in conflict zones all over the world.
For sure.
If faith can be this catalyst for positive change, even in the most challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
It's a force we need to understand and leverage more effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really makes you consider the unique position that religious organizations find themselves in when responding to these kinds of crises.
Right.
They're called to be peacemakers, but they also have to navigate these incredibly volatile and often dangerous environments.
That's true. And it's not just a theoretical challenge, right?
Right.
I mean, in the DRC, we see how the conflict directly impacts the church's ability to carry out its core mission of outreach and community building.
For sure.
It really underscores the real world stakes involved.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to that multifaceted nature of the church's response. The call to prayer isn't just about spiritual support.
Right.
It's also about galvanizing individuals and communities to work towards peace, even when faced with immense obstacles.
And that brings us back to those postponed evangelistic campaigns. It's almost like a microcosm of the larger conflict, isn't it?
It is.
The church is trying to build bridges,
right?
Spread a message of hope.
Yeah.
But those efforts are being hampered by the very forces that they're trying to address.
Exactly. And it raises an interesting question about the long-term implications for the church's presence in the region. If these campaigns continue to be delayed, could it impact the church's ability to connect with people and build a sense of community?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how are individual members of the church coping with all of this?
Yeah.
They're being called upon to pray for peace, yet they're also witnessing the disruption of events designed to foster that very peace.
Right.
It must be a difficult balance to strike.
It is, and it really just underscores the importance of individual resilience and faith in times of crisis. You know, when everything around you feels chaotic and uncertain, finding that strength and hope within yourself can be incredibly powerful.
It also highlights, that global interconnectedness of the Adventist community. This conflict may be centered in the DRC, but that call to prayer is resonating with Adventists all over the world.
For sure.
Uniting them in this shared sense of concern and purpose.
Absolutely.
I find that incredibly moving.
I agree. It speaks to that idea that faith can transcend geographical boundaries, creating this support system that extends far beyond that immediate crisis zone.
Speaking of which, this isn't the first time that the DRC has faced this kind of turmoil.
Right.
We have that 2008 statement from the General Conference addressing a previous conflict. It's fascinating how, even after all these years, so many of the core themes resonate with what's happening today.
You're absolutely right. The concern for the safety of church members, the calls for peaceful resolution, the desire to alleviate suffering.
Right.
All of these are constants in the church's response to conflict, regardless of the time period.
And that 2008 statement went even further, didn't it?
It did.
It explicitly called for international intervention to help end the crisis.
Wow.
That seems particularly relevant today, given how complex the situation is and how challenging it's been to achieve lasting peace.
It does. The statement really emphasizes that need for a global response to what's happening in the DRC. It's not just an internal issue for the region, it's a challenge that demands attention and action from the international community.
There's one more thing from that 2008 statement that I found really striking.
Okay.
The General Conference felt it was necessary to directly address and refute claims linking the rebel leader at the time to the Adventist Church.
Oh, interesting.
They were very clear in separating the actions of an individual from the values and beliefs of the entire organization.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It highlights the delicate situation that religious organizations often face.
Yeah.
When individuals associated with them, whether directly or indirectly, engage in actions that contradict their core principles.
Right.
The church was clearly concerned about being wrongly associated with the violence and made a conscious effort to distance itself from the conflict.
It makes you wonder about those broader challenges, the religious organizations face in maintaining their neutrality and credibility in these conflict zones.
For sure.
How do they stay true to their mission of promoting peace and understanding while also navigating the complexities of such a volatile environment?
Right.
It's a delicate balance, to say the least.
It certainly is, and it speaks to the importance of clear communication, both within the organization and to the outside world.
Right.
The church's response in 2008 demonstrates that even in the midst of crisis, it's crucial to reiterate your core values and ensure that your actions align with your message.
And it raises an even bigger question, doesn't it?
It does.
What role should religious organizations play in responding to conflict and promoting peace?
Right.
Is it enough to simply offer prayers and spiritual support?
Yeah.
Or do they have a moral obligation to take more concrete action?
That's a question that has challenged theologians and humanitarian organizations for centuries.
Right.
There's no easy answer, and the approach will likely vary depending on the specific context.
Sure.
But one thing is, clear faith can be a powerful force for good in the world. And religious organizations have this unique opportunity to leverage that power to make a positive difference.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the DRC and the current conflict.
Yeah.
The Adventist Church's call to prayer is a powerful reminder that faith isn't just about personal beliefs. It's about collective action. It's about coming together to support those in need and work towards a more peaceful future.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can flourish and inspire change.
Right.
And that's a message we all need to hear regardless of our background or beliefs.
It's fascinating to see how both of these sources, even though they're years apart, how they grapple with that question.
Yeah.
The call to prayer seeks divine intervention, of course, but it also encourages individuals to, actively work toward peace. And the 2008 statement, while acknowledging the role of faith, goes a step further by urging international involvement.
And I think what's striking is that, both responses underscore this really crucial connection between faith and action.
Yeah.
It's not this either-or scenario.
Right.
But rather this really dynamic interplay.
Yeah.
So, while prayer might offer solace and guidance, it's the tangible actions that are inspired by faith that truly make a difference.
Yeah, and that's where I think this deep dive gets really thought-provoking for our listener.
Yeah.
It's easy to read about conflict in a far-off place.
Right.
But, these sources kind of bring it home. They force us to ask ourselves, how does our faith inform our actions, even in everyday life?
It's a powerful question, isn't it?
It is.
Because it's not always about those grand gestures.
Right.
Sometimes the most impactful action is, simply extending compassion or advocating for justice or even just educating ourselves about the complexities of these situations.
I think that 2008 statement in particular does a great job of highlighting that need for informed action. Remember how they directly addressed those false claims about the rebel leader?
Right.
It shows that dispelling misinformation is in itself a form of action.
Yeah.
It's about creating space for truth and understanding to flourish.
That's such a critical point because in a world, that's just saturated with information.
Right.
Discerning truth from falsehood becomes crucial, especially when it comes to sensitive issues like conflict. And that discernment, I believe, is closely tied to the values we cultivate through our faith.
So for you listening, here's something to ponder.
Okay.
We've seen how the Adventist Church is responding to the conflict in the DRC, blending that spiritual support with tangible action. But what does this mean for you personally? How does your own faith or even just your personal values guide your actions in a world that is just filled with challenges and injustices?
That's a question worth reflecting on, isn't it?
It is.
Because ultimately, I think both of these sources point toward a single truth.
Yeah.
Our beliefs, whatever they may be, are most meaningful when they translate into positive change in the world around us.
That's a great point. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive for today.
Well said.
Thanks so much for joining us. We hope it's sparked some new insights and maybe even inspired you to take action in your own way.
Absolutely.
Until next time.